Good evening. This is the big story tonight. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. We've got just 2 days to the repeat poll, and President Uhuru Kenyatta has today met the chairman of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, Wafula Chebukati. State House spokesman Manoa Esipisu has confirmed the closed-door meeting that was held at the President's office at Harambee House today. He says the President has nothing against the IEBC and remains committed to the success of the fresh poll.
Between the President and the chair of the IEBC. The President has reiterated what he has said before, that he doesn't have any issues with the IEBC. He doesn't have any conditions or demands other than the election being held in terms of the orders given by the Supreme Court, that is within 60 days, and in this case on the 26th of October, which is a date set by the IEBC.
Proper consultations are done and proper reforms are carried out, and those fears that we raised are addressed, which made us pull out of this race, then we will consider.
To talk or to have an election 2 days from today. That is the focus of our conversation tonight on The Big Story. It is what we are covering tonight on the show. So we're going to speak to a number of people. We will have Sophia Wanuna, who's our lead reporter. She will be speaking to the majority leader in the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen. We'll also have Njonjo Mue from the Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu, which has been part of a caucus known as We the People tonight. He will be joining me as well to speak about why they want us to talk rather than go to an election on the 26th of October. And from Kisumu tonight, I'll also be speaking to Archbishop Kodia of the Bondo Diocese, Archbishop David Kodia from the Anglican Church of Kenya, to just get the religious leaders' view on this issue that's coming up just 2 days from today with lots of apprehension. So first, I want to start off with our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's joining me from the precincts of Parliament. Sophia, good evening. So isn't that the big question tonight? I mean, there's a group of people calling for talks on the 26th. Another says we're ready to go into an election.
Good evening, Yvonne. Yes, calls for talks and dialogue continue. Well, today one version of talks did happen, and that's between Uhuru Kenyatta and Chebukati Wafula, the chair of the IEBC. Remember, these two last met about 2 months ago when the chair IEBC declared Uhuru Kenyatta president-elect, handing him that certificate. And since then, there have been calls for talks even at that level. IEBC saying there is need for dialogue. In fact, when Chebukati read out his statement last week, that was one of what he called out as a yellow carding moment, that in fact the candidates needed to sit down and be able to talk. Amongst other issues he maintains need to be resolved ahead of the repeat poll, especially on the political arena. But in as far as the more significant talks, if I may say, is those that have been called for between President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister, the international community continuing to add their voice earlier today when they came together in that press briefing. And also remember last week, Raphael Tuju, the Secretary General, Jubilee, had indicated that the President would not be meeting the chair. So let's start off there with the leader of majority, Kipchumba Murkomen. We are in his office here at the Parliament buildings. Thank you so much for making time for the big story. So let's begin with what was the change of heart with the meeting today?
Well, there was no change of heart. As a matter of fact, the President never said he was not going to meet the chair. What the Secretary General said that is the President may not meet the chair if the discussion is about postponing elections or it's about forming government outside the Constitution. But the chair made it clear to the President that he wanted to meet him in so far as preparedness for the elections is concerned. We had gone for the similar meeting in Bomas. Today, the President met in Harambee House. And I think it was kind and reasonable for the President to do so. But knowing we have insisted as Jubilee that we respect the independence of IEBC, just like we respect the independence of all institutions, including the courts, even when we don't agree or when even criticize them. So we know that no amount of meetings will change the constitution. No amount of meetings will change the mandate of IEBC to conduct credible, fair, free, and credible elections, and to do so within the 60 days provided for in the constitution. And you had the diplomats saying that today that at least we don't have an alternative to the constitution, and we must follow the constitution. It is. I have seen so many people saying that these elections may not be free, fair, and credible. Under whose eyes? The only eyes that can say with finality whether the elections were free, fair, and credible are the eyes of the Supreme Court judges, which comes after the elections itself, and they promise that if they will be not free, fair, and credible, then again they will nullify the elections.
All right, let's go back to that meeting and talk to us about what unfolded. What was the conversation between the president and the chair?
I think it was straightforward. The president entered, met with the chair, and to the meeting, and the chair briefed the president on the extent of their preparedness, and they said from a technical perspective they're fully prepared, they're ready to run the elections, and that the chair, a statement that he had made in public, that he is concerned about the insecurity or the heightened political action in some areas that may lead to insecurity and the threats against the IEBC officials, where the president said that the government is going to provide security because it's a constitutional mandate of every Kenyan to be safe and secure. The second issue was, for the president, who raised immediately the issue of whether or not we have any conditions on IEBC, and the president was very categorical that he was only meeting the chair to understand, to hear his point of view on the preparedness, but he was very clear in his mind that he's preparing for the elections on 26, and that Jubilee from the beginning have never had conditions on the part of IEBC.
Did the chair extend an invitation to the president to a meeting between him, the president, and Raila Odinga?
Not such invitation was extended, and I think it's because we had made it public in the past that, it was clear to us on Jubilee side that the president, there was no negotiation we were going to have with any other players, because we had no issues with what Raila was raising with IEBC. He didn't raise it with Jubilee, he raised it with IEBC. And the issues that IEBC was going to raise with us, we were going to be ready to be able to solve. So the question of meeting Raila Odinga, we had made it clear in the public that we are ready to meet Raila Odinga over any other subject, but not to discuss the independence of IEBC.
All right, let's talk about that meeting, because it's what you're hearing the international community talk about. The religious leaders have come out, civil society groups across the board. There are more and more calls that the two should sit and talk, dialogue at this critical moment. Tensions are high, 2 days to go to this repeat poll. Isn't the president considering at all to meet Raila Odinga, sit down, talk, reassure Kenyans that all is well ahead of that poll?
Why should the president meet Raila Odinga and not Omolo Akech, fishmonger in Kisumu, or Mwanzia in Makueni? Why would the president want to meet Raila Odinga?
Because this is a country that is deeply divided between two divides largely. It was the same 2013, and many would even criticize the president for not uniting the country in those 5 years, or 4.5 if you like. So here we are going to another election divided again. You cannot dismiss the support that Raila Odinga enjoys in the country, sir.
Particularly, that's the point. Because you're saying that when someone has political support, he will be blackmailing people to talking to him. So is Raila Odinga running a militia or an independent entity or a gang so that we have to negotiate with him? This is Kenya. The Kenyans who voted for Raila Odinga are Kenyans who are exercising democratic right, that they voted for him because of his manifesto. And for all it takes, we were told they voted because they believed in the policies of NASA. It's not because of Raila Odinga. And if it's because of one person, then they were completely misconceived. The idea that we are trying to build as Jubilee, and by the way, these elections of 26, we have gone beyond voting for Uhuru Kenyatta. We in Jubilee believe that 26 is a date with destiny for this country. It's a time to protect the democracy of this nation. It is an opportunity for us to protect the constitutions against individuals. Raila Odinga has been pontifying in the public that one individual is not important as the state. That will be put into ballot on 26. So it will be laughable for any Kenyan to want to die on behalf of Raila Odinga or Uhuru Kenyatta. I mean, as a matter of fact, when they dine and meet in a meeting in Nairobi, how is that useful to a farmer in Migori? This fallacy and foolishness that has engulfed this nation for too long, that if a person of my tribe is in office, I'm going to benefit, or that if two politicians, as a matter of fact, we meet all the time with the NASA politicians in this office where we are sitting here, or down here in the Senate chambers. We visit each other when we have problems. We fundraise for each other when our children have issues or our families have issues. We even loan ourselves money to each other. Our children go to the same schools. What is this nonsense that tension will be ensue if I disagree with Orengo or Wetangula on a point of political issues? It is that actually narrative that you people must change. If you can't change that narrative so that you are telling people all the time, two people must sit down, you are not saying that Kenyans must wake up and rise above Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga.
Senator, many quarters are calling for those talks. It is not one individual saying. So are you saying everybody is wrong but Jubilee, that there should be dialogue?
I don't think everybody is wrong but Jubilee. Everybody is wrong except those who are coming to protect their vote on Thursday. And I think those who are voting on Thursday will be voting to demonstrate that whether those people who are saying we cannot have a vote is a right, or those who are saying that we must have the vote are right. Dialoguing as a nation on issues that affect citizens is important, but dialoguing for vanity's sake. I mean, what dialogue will you have about holding election within 60 days? We had that dialogue in August 27, 2010, when we passed the new constitution. We agreed that we will abide by this constitution. And the moment we begin to dialogue outside the constitution, to push us to have elections outside the constitution provisions, we'll dialogue tomorrow to hang somebody. We'll dialogue tomorrow to water down the Bill of Rights, because we are discussing a section of the Bill of Rights of Section 38, the right to vote. And who told you that if Uhuru Kenyatta meets Raila Odinga, he will have represented me as a voter not to vote on Thursday? So if we want to build this constitution, we must see Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga on the face and tell them we will vote on Thursday, we'll vote for your manifestos, we'll vote for what we believe in, and this nation belongs to us. It can't belong to one person. Because you know what, Sophie? What we are about to establish is a dangerous precedent where in the future, and I'm not looking at even these elections, what stops us in 2022? Another presidential candidate, say William Ruto, runs. Suppose he doesn't win. Yeah? He goes and holds together a few people from his tribe, 2 or 3 counties, and says that there will be no elections in this country. Do you want to have a nation like that, where one individual will be holding this country in ransom? We are voting on Thursday to tell the world that we, the people of Kenya, are going to have to dictate the destiny of this nation, not going to be dictated by warlords who are going to use their tribes and using poor people to hold the country at ransom. And I said before, I hate to see another elections where we'll be saying, oh, let's live in peace, let's meet for prayers. It should be so obvious that because the people are in charge of their destiny, politicians are not going to dictate to them to fight.
All right. Finally, before I take it back, that meeting between President Kenyatta and the chair, I watched a short clip of the president walking in. He appeared to say the least pissed, did not even make eye contact, and body language analysts have been saying, wow, what a moment. What do you say to that? Because this is the same chair that handed him certificate and declared him in on 10th of August.
I think you are reading too much. The president must have been tired. Today he was holding meetings with so many people. He was rushing also for a rally, and it was getting late in the afternoon, and it was the last public rallies we are going to hold. So I think you must have read his different mood, dealing with different issues. You know, now we are dealing with agents, we are dealing with security across the country, we are dealing with, this whole call for dialogue, which is actually completely misconceived. And I think that you read that to the chair. And the chair also is stressed. I mean, you don't think that the chair is just happy sitting there with all these conversations about elections and officers being beaten and fights are going on. I mean, really, every one of them must have had a very awkward moment. And so meeting, and particularly for meeting at the midst of all these preparations, you must have read beyond that. What's important for all of us as Kenyans and for us on the part of the citizens, I want to tell Kenyans, if tomorrow we will have a conversation after elections, which the president must, after elections, the president must continue having conversation with everybody, including Raila Odinga. He must continue having that dialogue. He will be the president. If he's elected the president, he must appoint every Kenyan from every corner to his government. And he must continue working. The unity of this country is a work in progress. And once he has that mandate to do that job he's going to do, then he must be able to work towards improving the unity of this country.
Yeah. Let me challenge you on that briefly before we go back to Yvonne. Every time, and even the president in televised interview yesterday when I interviewed him last, we keep talking about unity as employing people to government. Is that how Jubilee interprets uniting the country, as having tribes represented in government? Because clearly it's not working.
That is the only remaining story. When we tell people that we have somebody in the cabinet in Nyanza, they say, oh, but it's just a woman. Or sometimes, oh, you know, it's not known. She's not a politician. So what do you want us to do? We have done the road. I mean, if it's a railway, the railway development actual development should be the basis for unity of the country. That's why the railway from Mombasa to Nairobi, the hospitals, where every hospital now has a referral, every county has a referral hospital, whether they voted for Jubilee or not. We are talking about universal access to education. We are going to have everybody going to secondary in January without pay, tuition fees. So all these stories we have put in public, if they are not enough to convince someone that devolution is there, everybody gets the money they deserve according to the formula of equitable sharing of resources. If that's not enough, if the perception is that we want to have that perceived representation in government, and I want to tell Kenyans, if tomorrow after elections the president talks and appoints Wetangula to cabinet, or Kalonzo to cabinet, or Raila Odinga to be a minister in a certain department, I can tell them that they will be laughing and working and doing work with the president. You, the same people who are fighting, will never even see or shake a hand with that same person who was appointed. So we must make a choice as a country that what are the indicators? And that's a good question from you. What will be the indicators of development? Is it by someone? I mean, countries like America, you've had the senior Bush, the junior Bush, this and that, this family running the governorship of Texas for a long time and so forth. And what people care most is who has the best policies for running the country. But you see this idea that, oh, our tribe has not sat there, my person is not sitting there, and that person has no direct benefit. The Akikuyu in Denderu has the same struggles like a Luo in Kisumu, like a Marakwet in Elgeyo Marakwet County. We just need to get out of this thing. And I think from Thursday we must continue this honest conversation. The media, you have a responsibility, and I find it so risky that sometimes you people, you run a conversation that they need to talk, but you never tell Kenyans, you never remind Kenyans, but however the constitution must be done, the election must be done within 60 days. Just like the ambassador spoke today and said, unfortunately, you gave yourself your constitution, you must follow the constitution, it will be done with 60 days, do it in terms of peace. The last thing, I don't know why we are not condemning this idea that in an election year, or in an election day, a gazetted election day, a day that is important for all Kenyans, that someone has announced that they will be doing mandamano protests, to do this. Is that what we want to do for the next 100 years? Or is it so special because Uhuru Kenyatta is in State House and it's Raila Odinga who's out there? So we must treat these threats to constitutionalism and the exercise of right equal, whether it is Raila who is out there or it will be tomorrow Murkomen. It will now be so easy for Murkomen to go and block 2 constituencies in Elgeyo Marakwet and block our presidential candidates across the country. We shouldn't allow that.
All right. Thank you. Many thanks. Leader of Majority in the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen. Yvonne speaking to us this evening here on The Big Story. Yvonne.
Sophia Wanuna from Parliament. The conversation continues. We've heard from the member of the Jubilee Party saying, no talks. Will we continue doing this for the next 100 years? Well, there's a different set of people that believe that talking is important and that talking must happen in this country, either before or on the 26th of October, or indeed even after. So let's take the conversation forward now. We've got Njonjo Mue from the caucus known as We the People. We also have joining us from Kisumu tonight is Bishop David Kodia. He is the Bishop of the Bondo Diocese of the Anglican Church of Kenya. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us on The Big Story tonight. Njonjo, I'd like to start off with you because in the statement that was released by We the People today, you are demanding that the October 26th election be called off. We've just heard from Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen, who says we will then precipitate a constitutional crisis.
Thank you, Yvonne. Our call today is necessitated by our analysis of the current situation and broad-based consultations that we have conducted, especially over the last 1 week with a number of stakeholders. And we, the people, comprises trade unions, civil society, academia. We are also reaching out to religious leaders as well as the private sector. Our analysis of the situation is that Kenya is not in an environment to hold a free, fair, and credible election this Thursday. Not only do we have the major challenger having formally withdrawn from the contest, but we also have the chair of the Electoral Commission and the former commissioner who resigned actually coming out and saying in no uncertain terms that they cannot guarantee a credible election. So where we have right now is that we have a deepening political crisis, and we are headed towards the edge of the cliff with our eyes wide open, and we are saying that it would not be responsible for the country to go into this cliff where we will certainly have escalated violence and loss of life.
That in a moment, but you do not believe that this will precipitate a constitutional crisis? The law says we must hold a repeat poll within 60 days.
Actually not. We've been here before. In 1997, under the old constitution, the people rose up and demanded certain changes to guarantee a free and fair election. And the president then had the presence of mind to rally together political leaders and come up with the interparliamentary political group, IPPG, set of minimum reforms that allowed elections to go on during that year. But even more importantly, under this current constitution, in 2012, we were supposed to have an election on on the second Tuesday of August 2012. But the High Court actually gave guidance and ended up helping the country to identify a new, more suitable election date in March 2013 that would guarantee that the country would be ready for this, that election. So we've been here before. We are not saying that we will violate the Constitution, particularly because we have provided a roadmap where we have urged the chair of the IEBC to go back to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to vacate the orders to hold the election on the 26th of October and give further guidance to give the country the much-needed time to ensure that we have a credible election.
Njonjo, we'll get into the details of these talks and just what they hope to achieve. I'd like to hear now from Bishop David Kodia, who's joining us from Kisumu. Bishop, you have been quite vocal about police brutality in the wake of the protests that have taken place in Kisumu. So what are your thoughts as to the viability of an election 2 days from now? Should we be having a poll on the 26th, on Thursday, or not?
Yes, my take is that election, as much as it is important, cannot be used to determine the destiny of a nation when all instruments that would work towards peace are not put into place. And I do believe that October 26th may be a defining moment for our country. First, one side of the nation is watching for that election. Another side of the nation is saying no to it. We cannot ignore the sovereign will of the other half of the nation that feels that the forthcoming presidential election is going to interfere with the tenets of democratic values in our country. So I do want to believe that without joining the bandwagon of NAS in their crusade against the no election, my take is that election being a very important way of deciding the leadership of any nation, it must be conducted within an environment of stability, not only political stability, but also social stability and all those facets that would make a nation what it is. So I don't believe that holding election in October is going to help Kenya resolve its political problems.
What will help Kenya solve its political problems, if not the vote 2 days from today?
I want to believe that we are so much in a hurry to look at a date for presidential election as the most important thing in our history as a nation. We have had several dates before, but our destiny as a nation can only be determined when people dialogue together. They map out their own destiny together. They bring on board all their views together so that each and every side that feels aggrieved can be able to express themselves and they can be able to reach amicable solution. But to say that the Constitution is dictating the terms for the election, I think that one will be counterproductive. People's sovereignty will always be above the Constitution.
So it seems like both of you are saying we should talk. Njonjo, you in your statement today say, we the people demand a national dialogue be convened to address the political situation in Kenya. Who will convene the talks? Who will be part of the talks?
First of all, Yvonne, I think we need to deal with the immediate crisis. As I said, that the immediate action is for the chair of the IEBC to approach the Supreme Court to vacate the orders to hold the election in 2 days' time. After that, we need to bring together a broad-based, multi-sectoral dialogue. We must point out that this is not about Jubilee and NASA. This is about we, the people. And a time comes, Yvonne, when political leaders fail to lead. The people must step forward and lead the country. And so we are saying that we are not prepared to go into an election to be sacrificed at the altar of political ambitions of whichever side, especially when we know there is an 80 to 90% chance of violence breaking out. And so we are saying that we can agree on who should be participating. We will have the political parties, we will have the trade unions, we will have the civil society groups, we will have the religious leaders, we will have academia and other formations of society. Kenya has been here before, and we cannot sit back and move towards an inevitable catastrophe merely because we must insist on going to an election that we know to be flawed even before it starts.
Okay, Njonjo, but let me ask you this, because you mentioned that we've been here before, but many times when we've seen these talks, it's mainly been a political solution between political actors, and the rest of Kenyans are meant to believe that now that two people who are on opposite sides of the divide have agreed that now, you know, all is well in Kenya. If you look at the talks that happened with the removal of the previous commissioners at the IEBC, there were talks that largely, you know, took place behind closed doors in a boardroom, and clearly a number of Kenyans aren't basically involved in these talks. So what would be the outcome? Would it just be for a political solution between Uhuru and Raila to, you know, agree to sit down or agree to some sort of compromise? Where does that leave the voter?
Well, first of all, in the immediate situation, there will need to be a political solution because you cannot have this kind of conversation without the buy-in from both sides. However, you're quite right. In Kenya, we have learned our lesson. In 2007, the Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation Forum was largely a political pact. And the things that involved us, the people, agenda item number 4, was largely forgotten as soon as the politicians agreed to share power. So I would agree with you entirely that this must be a broad-based, multi-sectoral dialogue that brings together all formations of society. We cannot agree that this is about facilitating Jubilee and NASA to have a dialogue to share power among themselves. We are beyond that point as Kenyans. We want a conversation that involves all of us because this is about our future and the future of our children.
Bishop, many have faulted the church over the last few years, and particularly in the run-up to the August 8th election, for taking sides, for not seeming to be strong enough in uniting the Kenyans. What role do you think the church would play in talks of any kind? And do you think they would wield the authority to perhaps get people to the negotiating table if this is what you want to happen?
I think the church is not just some few individuals the way it is perceived. Like when a bishop fails to talk about something, then the church has kept quiet. The church is an institution. And as an institution, we have our own mechanisms of collating views from the people, assessing them, and giving our opinion as a collective institution. So, and again, I have to admit that the church for quite some time had been divided along ethnic lines. And this is the most unfortunate situation, because what it is in Kenya today, if your leader or a leader from your region prescribes to one line of political thinking, you as a leader from that region, there is that temptation also to side along that line. And this is unfortunate. Ours, we are supposed to be guided not only by the Spirit of God, but also our own institutional framework as a church. So I want to believe that nothing is still lost. We can still reason together. We can still solicit the command of our following, so that we have one united voice, not only as a church, but also a voice that will appeal to the entire nation.
Right, Bishop David Kodia from the Bondo Diocese of the Anglican Church of Kenya, and John Jamue from We the People. We want to continue with this conversation after this short break right here on The Big Story. So do stay with me, gentlemen, and to you, our viewers. We'll be right back.